There comes a moment in every life when a person stops and wonders, why does nothing ever change? They work harder, they try again, they start over, but the same patterns keep returning. The reason is simple. Nothing changes until your thinking does, because your mind is like a magnet. Whatever you hold in it, faith or fear, confidence or doubt, abundance or lack, will draw to you its physical counterpart. That's the law. And once you understand it, you'll never again be the same. In this message, I'm going to share the one principle that has built every fortune, shaped every success, and transformed every life that ever rose above mediocrity. You'll learn how your thoughts, held steadily and deliberately, become the causes of everything you experience, and how to harness that law to build the life you want. I'll show you how to break free from negative patterns of thinking, how to plant ideas of growth and abundance, and how to guard your mind so that only the right thoughts take root. If you listen closely and apply what you hear, you'll walk away with a new understanding of who you are, what you can do, and how limitless your potential truly is. Because once you change the way you think, nothing in your life can remain the same. Most people live as if they're passengers in their own lives, waiting for something outside themselves to change. They wait for opportunity, for luck, for someone else's approval. And when nothing changes, they say, that's just the way life is. But life isn't something that happens to you. It's something that responds to you. The outer world is a mirror of the inner world. What you hold in your mind, you hold in your hand. Now, the problem isn't that people don't want to succeed, it's that they've never been taught how to think. We're trained to memorize, to follow, to repeat, but not to use our imagination, not to control our attention, not to direct the power of our thoughts. Yet that's the secret every successful person has discovered, whether they knew it consciously or not. They've learned to think deliberately, creatively, purposefully. So if you've been trying, working, striving, but still find yourself stuck, it's not that you're missing opportunity. You're missing the right way of thinking. And once you change that, everything else falls into place. In the minutes ahead, I'm going to share what I consider the most important discovery any person can make: that you become what you think about. We'll explore how this law works, why it's the simplest, most powerful truth in the world, and how you can begin using it consciously to create the results you want. You'll learn how to recognize the thoughts that have been holding you back, how to replace them with ideas that move you forward, and how to train your mind to stay focused on your goal until it becomes reality. You'll see why your results in every area of your life are simply the mirror of your most dominant thoughts. And I'll warn you, once you truly understand this, you can never unlearn it. Because from that moment on, you'll realize that every outcome, every success, every failure begins in the same place, in the quiet of your own mind. So listen carefully, because what you're about to hear isn't just another motivational message. It's a blueprint for how to think, how to grow, and how to live. A new mindset begins right here. Here's something most people never stop to realize: your entire life, in every detail, is nothing more and nothing less than a mirror of your own thinking. Every result you see around you, your work, your income, your relationships, your level of peace or frustration, began as a thought. Thought is the seed. Circumstance is the harvest. And once you understand that, you'll never again look at life the same way. Life operates by law, the great law of cause and effect, and thought is the first cause. Every action, every decision, every step forward or backward begins in the quiet privacy of your own mind. Whatever you consistently hold in your thoughts, whether it's faith or fear, confidence or doubt, gratitude or resentment, life takes it and makes it real. You can't think one way and live another. You can't plant one kind of seed and expect a different harvest. The mind, like fertile soil, doesn't care what you plant, it simply returns what you give it. If you plant corn, you get corn. If you plant weeds, you get weeds. If you fill your mind with worry, fear, anger, and limitation, you will harvest a life that reflects those things. But if you fill it with faith, purpose, gratitude, and belief, you'll begin to see those qualities bloom everywhere around you. Now, here's where most people go wrong: they think unconsciously. They live with their minds wide open, allowing every passing worry, every negative headline, every careless remark to take root. Then, months or years later, when the results of those thoughts begin to appear, when trouble comes, when opportunity disappears, when joy seems distant, they blame the world. But the world is innocent. It's only the mirror. It's only showing you what you've been thinking about all along. That's the hardest truth for most people to face, but it's also the most liberating. Because it means you're not a victim of your circumstances, you're the author of them. Think of your mind as a garden. Every day, you're planting something. You may not realize it, but you're sowing seeds with every thought you entertain. A gardener who doesn't plant anything at all won't have an empty field for long. Weeds will move in. Nature hates a vacuum, and so does the mind. If you don't deliberately plant the thoughts you want, something else will grow, usually fear, doubt, or worry, because that's what the world supplies in abundance. But when you learn to take control of your garden, to plant ideas of purpose, faith, courage, and discipline, the weeds begin to die out and your whole inner landscape changes. Now, this isn't just poetry, it's law. Your mind is like a magnet. It attracts in physical form what you consistently hold in your mental form. You can test this. Hold an idea in your mind long enough. Think about it daily. Imagine it as real. Act as if it were already on its way, and sooner or later it begins to appear. People call that luck or coincidence, but it's neither. It's the law of thought in action. You attract what you think about. The problem is, most people don't think about what they want, they think about what they fear. And the law doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care whether your thought is positive or negative. It simply obeys. Let me give you an example. Picture two people working in the same office. One spends his days thinking about opportunity, how he can improve, how he can serve better, how he can learn something new. The other spends his days thinking about frustration, how unfair things are, how underpaid he feels, how unlucky he's been. Now, they both arrive at the same time, they both leave at the same time, and they both work under the same roof. But come back in 5 years, and you'll find them living in two different worlds. The first will have advanced, grown, and earned more, not because he's luckier, but because his thinking attracted the conditions for growth. The second will likely still be complaining, still feeling trapped, still reaping the same harvest from the same seeds he never stopped planting. You can't hold one thought in your mind and produce the opposite result in your life. You can't think failure and live success. You can't think resentment and live in peace. You can't think scarcity and experience abundance. The law is absolute. As you think, so you become. Your world is shaped, day by day, by the texture of your thoughts. Now, if this truth feels heavy, let it also feel freeing. Because if your thoughts have created your current life, and they have, then new thoughts can create a new one. You don't need a new world, you need a new mind. Change the cause, and the effect must follow. That's how life works. It has no choice. So take a moment and ask yourself, what have I been thinking about most? What ideas occupy my attention each day? Are they thoughts of faith or fear? Of growth or limitation? Of creation or complaint? Because whatever dominates your thinking today will determine the shape of your life tomorrow. That's not philosophy, it's arithmetic. And when you really understand this, when you see that the entire universe responds to your thought, you begin to live differently. You become more careful with your inner dialogue. You stop repeating negative phrases about yourself. You stop using words like can't and impossible. You begin to guard your mind the way a wise man guards his treasure, because you realize that it is your treasure. So from this moment on, treat your thoughts as the builders of your destiny, because that's exactly what they are. Each one is a brick, and the structure you're building will stand for years to come. Whether it's a palace or a prison depends entirely on what kind of bricks you use. But knowing this law is only the beginning. The real question is, how do we take control of it? How do we stop thinking by accident and start thinking by design? How do we become deliberate gardeners of the mind, planting the kind of thoughts that will produce the kind of life we truly want? Let's talk about that next. Here's something almost no one ever does, and yet it's the single most important thing you can learn to do. Most people never think deliberately. They react. They drift. They allow their minds to run wherever fear and habit lead them, and then they wonder why their lives seem uncertain, scattered, and out of control. But the truth is simple. The mind is like a great ship. If you don't take the wheel, the wind will decide your direction. If you don't chart a course, you'll drift wherever the tide takes you. That's what most people call life, but it isn't life, it's reaction. The successful few are different. They've learned to think on purpose. They've learned that control of the mind is control of destiny. You see, you can't build a new life with the same thoughts that created the old one. You must begin to think anew. Every great achievement in history began with one person sitting down, deliberately and quietly, and thinking, not worrying, not reacting, but thinking. That's where every invention, every book, every success story, every step of progress began. Yet how few people ever sit down with themselves and ask, what do I really want? What am I capable of? What kind of person must I become to create the life I desire? Those questions alone, asked sincerely and consistently, can change the entire direction of a life. But most never ask them. They're too busy answering the noise of the world. You can prove this for yourself. Ask 10 people what they really want in life, what their definite purpose is, and most will look at you blankly. They've never thought about it long enough to form an answer. That's why they drift. That's why they feel stuck. The mind, without a clear purpose, becomes like a machine. Without a blueprint it works, but it builds nothing. Let me give you a picture. Imagine an architect sitting down to design a great building. Before a single brick is laid, before the ground is even cleared, he begins with a plan, every beam, every door, every inch of the structure thought out in advance. Without that plan, the building would collapse under its own confusion. Yet most people go through their lives without a plan at all. They wake up each morning, move through the same routines, and hope something good will happen by chance. But chance builds nothing. Thought builds everything. And this is what deliberate thinking means: to stop reacting and start designing. It means to begin each day with purpose, to set aside time, even just 15 minutes, to sit in quiet reflection and think about what you want, what you're doing, and why. It means to examine your thoughts the way a craftsman examines his tools to see which ones serve you and which ones are dull or dangerous. It means to ask yourself powerful questions, because the quality of your life will always follow the quality of your questions. Don't ask, why am I so unlucky? Ask, what can I learn from this? Don't ask, why is this so hard? Ask, how can I become better? The mind always finds an answer to the question it's asked. That's why deliberate thinking is so powerful. It teaches you to ask for the answers that lead forward instead of backward. Now you might say, but I don't have time to think. And that, right there, is the tragedy of modern life. We have time to worry, time to complain, time to be entertained, but not time to think. And yet thinking is the one activity that can solve every problem you have. Most people's minds are like a radio left on all day, playing every frequency at once: static, noise, confusion. But when you learn to quiet that noise, to tune your attention to a single, clear frequency, the one that transmits your goal, something miraculous happens. Ideas begin to come. Inspiration flows. Answers rise from places you didn't know existed. You begin to see connections, opportunities, possibilities that were invisible before. You see, the disciplined thinker becomes the master of his environment, not its victim, because once you can think clearly, nothing can control you, not circumstance, not other people's opinions, not even fear. Clear thought is strength. Purposeful thought is power. It's the one ability that separates man from every other creature, the power to choose his thoughts and, through them, his life. But that power must be trained. It doesn't come naturally. The mind, left on its own, is like a wild horse, restless, powerful, but undirected. It must be harnessed, and the harness is deliberate thinking. Let me give you another image. A sailor without a compass may set out full of energy, full of hope, full of intention, but if he doesn't know which direction he's sailing, he'll waste his strength fighting the wind. He'll drift in circles, certain that he's moving, but never arriving. The man who thinks on purpose is like a sailor with a chart and a compass. He knows where he's going. He adjusts his course when the weather changes. He doesn't waste effort on the waves. He uses them to move forward. And this, truly, is the difference between the average person and the extraordinary one. Both face storms. Both encounter setbacks. Both feel fear and doubt. But the one who has learned to think deliberately uses those experiences to grow, while the one who hasn't simply reacts to them and calls it fate. Now, if you begin this practice, if you make it a habit to think on purpose, you'll start to notice something remarkable. You'll begin to see possibilities where before you saw only limits. Because the moment you control your thinking, you control your belief. And belief is the next great law of the mind. It's the bridge between the thought you hold and the life you live. So in the next section, let's explore that law, the law of belief, and see how whatever you believe, deeply and consistently, you become. There's a quiet law that governs every life, a law so simple that most people overlook it, yet so powerful that it shapes the destiny of nations. Whatever you believe, you become. You. cannot rise higher than your belief in yourself, and you cannot fall lower than the image you hold of who you are. Belief is the invisible architect of destiny. It builds the boundaries of what you dare to attempt and the ceiling of what you allow yourself to achieve. If your belief is small, your world will be small. If your belief is large, your world will expand to meet it. The world has always been shaped not by men of strength, but by men of belief. Now, belief is not a wish. It's not a shallow hope or a passing feeling. Belief is certainty, a deep conviction that something is true long before the evidence appears. You might say that thought is the seed, but belief is the soil that allows it to grow. Without belief, thought dries up before it takes root. You can hold a beautiful idea in your mind, you can picture a grand goal, but if deep down you don't believe it's possible for you, the mind rejects it. It can't act on what it doesn't accept as true. That's why belief is the bridge between thought and reality. It connects what you imagine to what you live. Most people, though, never question their beliefs. They inherit them. They're handed down by parents, teachers, peers, and repeated so often they become invisible. They go through life not realizing that what they call reality is simply the reflection of what they believe to be true. They think in terms of limits because they've accepted limits. They say, "I could never do that," and so they don't. They say, "That's just how things are," and so things remain that way. But those who rise above those who break free are the ones who refuse to let the old beliefs of others define what's possible for them. Let me give you a picture. Imagine a sculptor standing before a great block of marble. To most, it's just a rock, heavy, solid, unchanging. But the sculptor doesn't see the marble. He sees the figure inside it. He sees the angel waiting to be released. And with every strike of the chisel, he's guided not by what is, but by what he believes can be. That's how belief works. The marble is your life full of potential, but unshaped. The sculptor is your belief, the force that sees beyond the surface and begins to carve what only faith can see. Without belief, the marble remains a block forever. But with belief, the masterpiece appears. This is what separates the poor in spirit from the rich in spirit. The poor think in terms of limitation. They say, "I can't, I'm not ready. That's for someone else." The successful think in terms of possibility. They ask, "How can I? What would happen if I tried? What can I learn to make it so?" One sees the obstacle and stops. The other sees the obstacle and begins. The difference isn't talent, luck, or education, it's belief. Now, you might ask, how do I change what I believe? And the answer is, by acting as if the belief you want is already true. You can't simply talk yourself into new faith, you must live into it. The mind learns by experience, and belief grows from evidence. If you act daily on your new belief, even in small ways, the evidence begins to mount. You begin to see results. Those results strengthen your belief, which in turn strengthens your action. And soon, what was once faith becomes fact. That's the hidden genius of every successful life. They didn't wait for belief to come before they acted until belief came. They built faith like a muscle, through daily use. And over time, that faith grew so strong, it carried them through storms that would have crushed others. Let me share another image. Picture a pilot flying through dense fog. He can't see the horizon. The world outside is invisible. But he doesn't panic because he believes in his instruments. He trusts the compass, the altimeter, the signals that guide him safely to his destination. Even when his senses deceive him, he trusts the instruments. Your belief works the same way. When you can't yet see your success, when circumstances seem dark and uncertain, you must trust the inner instruments of thought and faith. You must keep flying straight, because just beyond the fog lies the clarity you've been seeking. Now, here's what makes belief so powerful. The subconscious mind, that silent servant that runs most of your life, accepts without question whatever you tell it over and over again. It doesn't know the difference between truth and imagination. It only knows repetition and emotion. If you constantly feed it thoughts of fear, failure, and limitation, it will accept those as commands and produce results to match. But if you feed it faith, confidence, and expectation, and do it consistently, it begins to shape your reality accordingly. That's why you must be careful about what you tell yourself. Every word you speak, every thought you repeat, is an instruction to your deeper mind. Say something long enough, and it becomes your belief. Believe it long enough, and it becomes your world. That's the law. Now, you might say, that sounds too simple. And yet, simplicity is the mark of truth. The greatest truths in life are always simple, because they're woven into the fabric of everything that exists. The law of gravity doesn't need to be complicated to work, and neither does the law of belief. Whether you understand it or not, whether you accept it or not, it's working right now in your life. You are living today in the world your beliefs built yesterday, and you will live tomorrow in the world your new beliefs are building today. So ask yourself, what do I really believe about myself? Do I believe I'm capable, or do I secretly doubt it? Do I believe I deserve success, or do I think it belongs to someone else? Do I believe in possibility, or in limitation? Because the answers to those questions are shaping your future even as you listen to this. And the good news, the liberating, beautiful truth, is that belief can be changed. You can choose a new one right now. You can begin to believe in your own greatness, in your own ability to create, in your own power to become more than you've ever been. And the moment you truly believe that, life begins to rearrange itself to make it true. Because life always responds to belief. But belief alone, as powerful as it is still not enough. Thought and belief together create vision, but only action makes it real. To change your life, you must take your new ideas, your new faith, and give them expression through what you do. Because thought without action is like a seed never planted full of potential, but forever unrealized. So in the next section, we'll talk about the law of action, the great proof of belief, the visible evidence of invisible thought. Now that we understand how thought and belief shape our inner world, it's time to give them life, to bring them into the world of form through action. Because until you act, even the greatest idea remains only a dream. Action is thought made visible. It's belief wearing a body. It's the bridge between the invisible and the tangible, between imagination and experience, between what is merely possible and what is finally real. Every achievement that has ever blessed the world began as a thought, but it came alive only when someone took the first step toward it. You see, thinking without action is daydreaming. Acting without thought is waste. But when thought and action work together, when the mind conceives and the hands move, the law of success begins to operate with perfect precision. And that's when life starts to reward you, because the law of cause and effect always honors movement. The world responds to the man who acts. It resists the one who waits. Here's something most people never understand. There is no such thing as a small action taken in faith. Even the smallest step in the direction of your goal sends a signal to the universe that says, I am ready. That signal begins to attract opportunity, to stir momentum, to set unseen forces in motion. But most people never send that signal. They think, they hope, they plan, but they never move. They wait for a sign, for a guarantee, for perfect timing. And while they wait, life passes. The successful man, on the other hand, knows that perfect timing doesn't exist. He knows that clarity comes from movement, not from sitting still. So he begins. He acts on the light he has, and in doing so, more light appears. Let me give you a picture. Think of a farmer standing before his field. He holds in his hand a bag of seed, good seed, full of life and promise. He could spend days thinking about how rich the harvest might be, how tall the crops could grow, how much profit he could earn. But until he plants those seeds in the soil, nothing happens. The earth can't respond to what he's only thinking about. It can only respond to what he does. So he plants, he waters, he works, and in time, nature rewards his effort. The farmer understands that thought is essential, but thought alone won't feed him. Only thought in action will. Now, I often tell people, you can't sit by a cold stove and say, give me heat, and then I'll add the wood. The stove doesn't work that way. It gives heat only after you add the fuel. Life is the same. You must pay the price before you can enjoy the reward. But the moment you act, the moment you move with faith, the fire begins to burn. You start to feel warmth, energy, purpose. And that's the secret. Action is not just the proof of belief. It's also the fuel of belief. Every step you take reinforces the faith that led you to take it. Now, some people hesitate because they're afraid of failing. They say, what if I try and it doesn't work? But the truth is, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. Every action produces a result. If it's not the result you wanted, it's simply information guiding you to adjust and try again. You can't steer a parked car, but once it's moving even slowly, you can change its direction. That's how progress is made, not in a single leap, but in the constant correction of small steps taken consistently. The only true failure is inaction. Because, while you're waiting for perfect conditions, someone else is learning from imperfect ones. And here's another truth. The universe loves action. It respects decisiveness. It rewards the man who moves with purpose, even if he must correct his course along the way. The world doesn't care how carefully you've thought about your goal, it cares only that you begin to move toward it. Because movement is the language of intention. Thought whispers what you want, but action declares it aloud. Now, this law, the law of action, works quietly but unfailingly. Once you've aligned your thoughts and beliefs with your purpose, every step you take creates a chain reaction. New opportunities begin to appear. You meet the right people. The right ideas come at the right time. Not by magic, but by law. Your movement creates momentum, and momentum invites more movement. That's why you'll often see that success seems to follow some people wherever they go. It's not luck, it's rhythm. They've learned to act on their thoughts quickly, to turn inspiration into motion and motion into achievement. And this, I must tell you, is where most dreams die. Not in the mind, but between the mind and the hand. Between knowing and doing. Between deciding and beginning. That small gap, the hesitation to act, is where countless lives are lost to fear and doubt. So close it. Act on your ideas. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until everything is perfect. Begin now, where you are, with what you have. Because action transforms what you have into more. Let me remind you of something simple. Every great success story began with one small, imperfect action. Every invention, every movement, every achievement began when someone stopped thinking and started doing. They didn't know how it would all work out, but they trusted that it would. And that trust, expressed through movement, is what separates those who achieve from those who only dream. So if you've been holding an idea in your mind, a goal, a vision, a desire, this is your moment to bring it into the light of action. Take the first step. It doesn't have to be big, it just has to be forward. Once you've acted, even in a small way, life begins to meet you halfway. The path ahead, which once looked uncertain, starts to reveal itself step by step. That's how it's always worked. And when you live this way, when you let your actions match your thoughts and your beliefs, something extraordinary happens. You begin to grow, not just in results, but in understanding, in confidence, in character. Because action is the beginning of growth, and growth is the proof of life. And that brings us to the next great law, the law of growth. Because once you've acted once, your thoughts and beliefs begin to express themselves through your daily effort. Something wonderful begins to unfold within you. The invisible changes start to become visible. You begin to experience growth from the inside out. And now we come to one of the most beautiful truths I've ever known, the law of growth. Everything in nature grows toward the image it holds within itself. The seed becomes the tree. The acorn becomes the oak. The thought, once planted, grows into the life that matches it. You and I are no exception. The mind expands toward its dominant thought. Whatever you dwell upon, day after day, becomes larger, clearer, and eventually becomes real. That is the great secret of life, that what you think about, you bring about. You see, growth is not something you force, it is something you allow. Just as a gardener cannot pull the seed from the earth to make it grow faster, you cannot rush the laws that govern your development. All you can do is plant the right idea, water it daily with belief and action, and trust that time will bring the harvest. The problem is that most people, impatient for results, keep digging up their seeds to see if anything's happening. They change their goals, they doubt themselves, they start over, and they wonder why nothing ever seems to take root. But the successful understand that growth begins unseen. They know that the invisible always precedes the visible, that faith must come before sight. I often think of the story of the Chinese bamboo tree. You plant the seed, you water it, you care for it, and for 5 long years nothing happens. No sprout, no sign, no change. And then, suddenly in the 5th year, the bamboo shoots up 90 feet in 6 weeks. Now, did it grow in 6 weeks or in 5 years? It grew the entire time, but it was growing where you couldn't see. That's exactly how the law of growth works in your own life. When you hold a goal in your mind, when you feed it daily with belief and action, even though nothing appears to be changing, it is. Something is taking shape within you. Roots are forming deeper confidence, clearer purpose, stronger character, and when the time is right, that quiet inner growth will burst into visible form. This is why consistency of thought is the secret of transformation. You must learn to hold your dominant idea long enough for it to mature. Every thought you think sets something in motion. But only the thoughts you nurture consistently with faith, gratitude, and patience become reality. That's the difference between a passing wish and a creative thought. A wish is a spark that flickers out. A creative thought is a flame that never stops burning. Now, the mind magnifies whatever it's fixed upon. If you focus on fear, it expands. Focus on failure, and you'll begin to see it everywhere. But focus on faith, and you'll start to find reasons to believe. Focus on growth, and you'll see progress where before there was only struggle. It's not that the world suddenly changes, it's that your mind does, and the world responds to match it. The law is absolute. What you focus on expands. Let me give you a simple image. Imagine your mind as a great radio receiver. You are always tuned to a certain frequency, a frequency of success, of confidence, of gratitude, or one of fear, of frustration, of limitation. The universe is full of every kind of broadcast opportunity, challenge, beauty, chaos, but you can only receive what your frequency allows. Most people spend their lives tuned to the station of worry, then wonder why they never hear anything else. The successful, on the other hand, keep their minds tuned to the station of purpose and possibility. When you stay on that frequency long enough, you begin to receive ideas, people, and events that match it. It's not magic, it's correspondence. It's cause and effect. And this is why I always say, you'll feel the change before you see it, because growth always begins inside. You'll begin to notice small things. First, a greater calmness in your thoughts, a sense of purpose in your mornings, a new clarity in your decisions. Those inner shifts are the roots of visible change. If you nurture them, they'll expand into results that others can see. But if you ignore them, if you stop watering your idea because you can't yet see the results, the roots will wither and the harvest will never come. So stay faithful to your vision. Keep your mind fixed on what you desire, not on what you fear. Because the moment you shift your attention from possibility to limitation, your growth stops. The mind can't grow in two directions at once. It will always move toward whatever holds its focus the longest. That's why your dominant thought, not your occasional wish, but your constant inner focus, determines everything. And here's the beauty of it. Once you learn to hold your thought long enough, once you've trained your mind to dwell on what you want instead of what you fear, you'll find that growth becomes effortless. It becomes your nature. The same law that once worked against you will begin to work for you. The same mind that once created struggle will now create peace. Because your mind was never your enemy, it was only your servant, waiting for clear direction. Now, I want you to pause and think about this. Look back on your life. Every great improvement you've ever made, every skill you developed, every challenge you overcame, every dream you brought to life, began with a change in your thinking. It began when you decided to focus on something higher, to stay with it longer, to believe in it stronger, and from that inner decision came visible growth. That's how it's always worked, and that's how it always will. So remember this truth: growth is not a sudden event, it's the natural result of right thinking, right believing, and right action practiced every day. You may not see it at first. You may wonder if anything's happening. But stay faithful. Keep your mind on your goal, your heart on your purpose, and your hands in motion. Because unseen growth is still growth, and when the time is right, it will astonish you. And that brings us to the final and most beautiful truth. Once you've changed the way you think, you've changed the entire direction of your life. Because your outer world will always mirror your inner one. The life you see around you is the reflection of what you've been creating inside. Change your inner world and your outer world must follow, it cannot do otherwise. That's not inspiration, it's law. And so we come to the end of this message, and yet, if you've truly listened, it's not an ending at all, it's a beginning. Because once you've understood that your life is the reflection of your thoughts, that belief builds the boundaries of your world, that action gives life to your ideas, and that growth follows whatever you hold in your mind, you can never again live as though you didn't know. You can't go back to drifting. You can't return to reacting. Because now you know the truth, that the cause of everything you will ever experience lies within you. The world around you is your mirror, and your mind is the artist painting it, stroke by stroke, thought by thought, day by day. If you look at your life right now, you're seeing the perfect reflection of what you've been thinking and believing about yourself up to this very moment. Every success, every disappointment, every relationship, every circumstance, it's all the result of what you've planted in your own mind. And if that truth makes you pause, let it also fill you with quiet excitement. Because if you don't like what you see, you can change it. You can start today. You can begin to build a new world within, and life, by law, will begin to mirror it. Now I want to remind you of the great truth we've been circling all along. You become what you think about. Not sometimes, not occasionally, not when it's convenient always. The mind doesn't rest, and neither does the law that governs it. Every hour, every minute, you are building your future. The only question is, are you building it consciously or unconsciously? Are you choosing your thoughts as carefully as a craftsman chooses his tools? Or are you letting the world choose them for you? Because one path leads to creation, and the other leads to confusion. One path builds a life of purpose, and the other drifts into circumstance. So, I want to offer you a simple challenge, one that could change the course of your entire life if you take it seriously. For the next 30 days, choose one clear, definite goal, something worthy of your time, your thought, and your energy. Write it down. Think about it every day. See it in your mind as though it were already yours. Talk about it as though it's on its way. Act in harmony with it. Refuse to entertain any thought that contradicts it. And above all, stay consistent. Hold it in your mind morning and night. Let it fill your imagination until it begins to feel inevitable. Because when a man or woman holds a single purpose in mind long enough, all of life begins to organize around it. At first, you may notice no change. The world may appear the same, but stay faithful. Remember the law of growth. The roots always come before the bloom. Keep watering your idea with belief, with action, with gratitude. And one morning, perhaps when you least expect it, you'll look around and realize that life has shifted. Opportunities will appear where before there were none. People will arrive who seem to know exactly how to help you. Circumstances will begin to align in ways you couldn't have planned. And you'll realize then that it wasn't magic, it was law. Because life is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of cause and effect. When you plant thought, you reap result. When you plant fear, you reap frustration. When you plant faith, you reap peace. When you plant purpose, you reap progress. The law never sleeps, never fails, never forgets. It works for every person, everywhere, all the time. You become what you think about. And once you understand that truth, once it moves from being something you've heard to something you've known, you'll live differently. You'll watch your thoughts the way a wise man watches his words. You'll guard your mind as a priceless treasure, because that's what it is. You'll stop speaking defeat, because you'll understand that every word you speak is a seed. You'll stop fearing the future, because you'll know that you're building it today. So wherever you are right now, whatever your life looks like at this moment, begin anew. Start thinking on purpose. Think about what you want, not what you fear. Think about who you can become, not what you lack. Think about how you can serve, not how you've been shortchanged. Because life always responds to the thinker who thinks in terms of possibility. And if you will do this, if you'll hold one great idea in your mind for the next 30 days, without letting doubt or distraction pull it apart, you'll begin to experience something remarkable. You'll start to see how the invisible becomes visible. You'll see the connection between thought and circumstance, between attitude and opportunity, between your inner world and your outer results. And when that happens, when you've proved it for yourself, you'll know that nothing will ever be the same again. If you stay with this practice, truly stay with it, you'll experience a transformation that no amount of luck could ever produce. Because this isn't luck, this is law. You become what you think about. The mind is the cause. Life is the effect. Change the cause and the effect must change. That's not philosophy, it's the nature of reality itself. And when you're ready to go deeper, when you want to understand why this law works with such absolute perfection, why thought creates form, why belief becomes fact, I invite you to listen to my message, The Strangest Secret. In it, I explain the great principle behind everything you've heard here today, the one secret that every successful person has discovered, that we become what we think about. It's the simplest truth in the world, and yet the rarest to live by. So take these words and begin today. Because a new mindset, a new life begins here, in the quiet of your own thought. Decide now that you'll no longer think by accident, no longer live by reaction, no longer let fear or habit steer the course of your destiny. Take the wheel, think deliberately, believe deeply, act faithfully, grow patiently, and watch as life, with perfect obedience, mirrors the greatness of your new thought. That's the law, that's the promise, and that's the truth.